Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and thank you guys for stopping by. In today's video I'm going to be sharing with you guys how to make egusi pudding. Egusi pudding is made out of melon seeds, which are also called egusi in Cameroon and West Africa, what you're seeing right now on your screens. Egusi is very healthy, high in zinc, and popularly known to be good for prostate health. You will most commonly find egusi pudding in Cameroonian gatherings such as weddings, birthdays, and little get-togethers. To make egusi pudding, you are going to be needing some of the following ingredients. Some are optional. To begin with, you're going to need eggs. You're going to need white pepper, bush pepper, and pepper. You're going to also need crayfish. I love mine finely grounded. You could make yours not finely grounded. You're also going to need meat or fish, but for me today I'm going to be using meat and fish. It's preferable to use dry meat when making egusi pudding. There's an extra feel that you get when chewing egusi pudding and then you feel a bite of dry meat. So because I couldn't get dry meat and a lot of people discouraged me from buying dry meat, I decided I was going to steam fresh meat and then give it a little bit of a fry to give it the dry feel in the mouth. You guys are going to see me do that. The next ingredient you're going to need is of course seasoning cubes and salt, and then you're going to need your leaf where you're going to tie your egusi pudding. If you're in a country where you can't access leaves easily, you can use foil paper. Oil is very much optional, just like the eggs, but the reason I'm using oil is to give my egusi pudding an extra shine and help it come off the leaf easily, just like the eggs. Now I'm going to be steaming my meat and my fish. A little twist I'm going to be doing here, instead of using like water from the tap, I'm going to be using the broth, or I'm going to be using the liquid that comes from my meat and my fish. So you can see I'm adding in some bush pepper, some pepper, and some white pepper, the spices I earlier on showed you guys. I'm going to use that to steam my meat, and then I'm going to use the liquid to mix my egusi pudding once I begin the mixing process. Right now I'm just adding some salt and some seasoning cubes into my meat and my fish, and I'm going to allow it to steam for a period of 15 minutes, and then I'll take it off and I'll show you guys the process whereby I cut the meat into smaller parts and then I fried it on very low heat, and I didn't put a lot of oil in the fry pan. I'm going to show you guys that as well. And yeah, so right now we are just going to start the process of making our egusi pudding. I'm opening up a well in the center of my egusi, showing you guys my meat after a little bit of frying. It looks really dry. I'm just pouring into the egusi pudding the liquid that came off the meat and the fish after boiling. So I'm going to mix it up. Remember, we already have spices in this water, so I'm going to mix it up and then I'll taste it before knowing what quantity of what to add again. So we have white pepper, bush pepper, pepper, seasoning cubes, salt inside this mixture already. You remember that. So I'm going to give it a good mix, and then of course I'm going to taste it, because after tasting I'm going to know what to add and what not to add. So it's always wise to keep a bit of dry grounded egusi at the side, should in case you make a mistake in pouring too much water into your pudding. You're now going to have like leftover egusi to put into the batter and make it to get to the right consistency. Now I made another well in the middle, put in some more water, adding now the rest of the spices, pepper, white pepper, bush pepper. I added the crayfish earlier on. I'm going to put some salt, and then of course I'm going to put some seasoning cubes again. Whenever I'm making food that requires to use crayfish, I always like to use Maggi crevettes, as I showed you guys earlier. This is Maggi that I don't know if they use crayfish to actually make it, or it's just a form of marketing or something, but I just have it in mind that every time I'm cooking food and I feel like it gives the food like an extra flavor and I love it, so I always use Maggi crevette instead of the regular Maggi cubes. And then of course you're going to give it a good mix again. I'll mix it up and mix it up and mix it up again, and now I'm going to put in my eggs. I ended up using 3 eggs. An egg is very optional. Just like I said in the beginning, some of the ingredients I'll show you are optional. The egg and the oil is optional. And of course, cooking varies a lot. You find people who put ginger, who put garlic in their egusi pudding. But then, according to your taste, how did you grow up eating egusi pudding? Did you ever eat it when you were young? How did your mom cook it? You might prefer it that way. So this is how I grew up seeing egusi pudding being made, and this is the taste I'm familiar with. So this is how I make egusi pudding. I would love for you to give this recipe a try and tell me what you think about it. Now I'm using a whisk, cause I believe that when you use a whisk, you make your pudding to have air and it mixes properly, like everything really mixes well. So after putting my egg, I went back, I took my whisk, and then I did some more mixing. So after giving it a good mix, I have to taste it again to be sure that everything is okay. Now, my secret to tasting things like kwakoko, like puddings that you have to mix, once you mix and tie, you cannot add anything. So you have to be very careful and make sure that it's tasting well. Like, you make sure that it's spicy enough, it has everything that you want it to have. So what I do is, when I taste puddings like this, like kwakoko, all these kind of mixtures, I make sure that it tastes slightly above. Like, don't overdo it, but you want to feel the taste of the maggi, or you want to feel it on your tongue, because when it cooks, I feel like generally the taste, it goes down a bit. So you want to make sure that you feel the taste of the maggi on your tongue. If you're not feeling the maggi on your tongue when you taste it, then you probably not put enough. So now I am just adding some salt. After tasting, I realized it was not okay. And also, I don't like some people like their consistency to be even thicker than this, but I prefer it a bit lighter, because when it's a bit lighter, you have an area pudding, and then when you cut it, it just feels soft, it's not too hard. And because I love to dry my egusi pudding on the grillage, so the drying gives it an additional dry effect, so I don't need it to be too hard when I'm just cooking it. So that's why I'm adding some water. And then also, because I had to add some more ingredients, I decided to put in a little bit of water to make the mixing of the ingredients easy. So I just added some pepper, some seasoning cubes, and then some more salt. So when you're putting in your seasoning cube and your salt and everything, you want to be very careful. I just added the oil that I used to fry my meat. The oil is also very optional, because I want my egusi pudding to be shining, and I want it to also come off the leaf easily. Now I'm just adding my meat, and I'm going to give it a good stir with the whisk. I'm going to mix it up, and then I'll immediately start tying my egusi pudding.